welcome to a live episode of the Scottish Property Podcast. My name's Nick Ponte. I'm joined with Stephen Clark. How you doing, Stephen?
Good, Nick. Good, thanks. How are you?
Brilliant. Looking forward to this wee live session. Now, we invite all the audience to comment, ask questions. We want to try and make this interactive as possible, get the conversation flowing, guys. Everybody will have an opinion. Some people might have experiences as well. One of the reasons we thought we'd do this kind of last minute live is because we've had a number of people reach out to us in the past week with some sort of negative experiences of dealing with property deal sourcers. Now, you know, everybody should do their own due diligence on every person that they work with and every deal that comes to them. This is what we want to try and educate you on tonight and try and help you as much as possible. Obviously, as a Facebook group, the Scottish Property Podcast Facebook group, we can only police it so much. We can't be responsible for everything that goes on there. We try and vet it as much as possible, and we have been removing certain posts and certain members as well over the past couple of weeks. But it's important for you guys really to be made aware of this and to do your extra checks.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so important, and you know, we're always drilling on about doing your due diligence on a property that you got to purchase, that you add to your portfolio, you want to flip. But doing a due diligence on a property sourcer is just as important, because that's a person you're going to be working with and doing some business with.
We want to make the community safe. We're trying to build this community of property investors, and it's going really good. We've got 3,100 people on Facebook. We've got loads of people that come to our monthly networking events as well. And we want to make it a safe place where people starting out, you know, don't feel intimidated and don't feel like they're going to get ripped off. So it's important to say right from the start, guys, I think that when you're new to property, I think that quite often you hear about these kind of the terminology off-market deals and stuff, and you hear about the below market value and the below home report and all the rest of it. I think it's important to say, just because it's off-market and just because it's below the home report value, that does not qualify it as a good deal. Stephen, do you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. All these things can be manipulated, depending on who writes the home report, what's in the home report, the person, the motivation of the people that's writing the home report. So yeah, these things are taken lightly. Take them up a pinch of salt, do your own due diligence, and make sure that you understand what the value is, and more importantly, the end value if you're going to be buying it in your portfolio.
Yeah, because just because it's like, you know, £10,000 under the home report value, the home report value might have been overinflated by the valuer. Sometimes they get it wrong. Do you know what I mean? I think it's also important to know over the last few years, 2-3 years, I think good off-market opportunities are quite rare. So this is another thing people starting out, because a lot of people will learn on the courses, you know, this is where you have to get your deals off-market. Then somebody approaches you from Facebook or LinkedIn and says, I've got all these access to all these off-market deals. And you think, wow, I'm going to work with that person, that individual. And I'm going to take what they say, you know, face value, and work with them and pay them a fee and all the rest of it. But at the end of the day, we have been living in a very buoyant market, a market where things have been going up 10% year on year over the past 2-3 years. The below market value off market deals are few and far between. Would you agree, Stephen? I know you've had a few recently.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know what's a good point to touch on as well, because I feel like I've saw deals that have came to me in the last few weeks, and you know, I know locally in the areas that I do flips in, and you know, Dunfermline and Fife, there's people that paid over £100,000 over the asking price for properties over a home report valuation. The market's been that hot for the last 18 months, the last couple of years. But what I've noticed is there's a couple of sources that have brought stuff to me, and they'll put the end value potential as a flip, or the end value potential for it as a buy-to-let, or the exit strategies that they're breaking it down. But when you actually look at it, that's not the end value. If someone's paid over £100,000 over the asking price for a property, they've paid because of market conditions and how much they won that property. It doesn't necessarily mean that that's the value of it. But a lot of these deal sources that are kind of slightly inexperienced is looking at that and taking it with a pinch of salt and going, well, there's a direct comparable of X, but they've never done their due diligence in the background and actually looked at what the valuation of that property actually was at the time that they paid it. Now, yes, it's all very subjective, and the valuation is what someone else is willing to pay for it. But if you're basing a comparable on £100,000 over the asking price, and a surveyor, then a bank instructs a surveyor for them to come out and do the end value for you to hold it, they won't put it to £100,000 over the asking price because they're looking in the bank's interest to go as low as low as it can, not as low as it can, but to mitigate the risk off the bank.
Mm-hmm. I think, as we said, there's been a couple of names brought to us in the past week, and one of the reasons why we're doing this, obviously, because we wanted to show people how you need to do your own checks, right? So one of the examples that was brought to us was somebody who was selling a deal. I'm pretty sure they're off the back of a property training course, which is fine, guys. We don't have any issue with property training courses. It's a great way to get started, get yourself educated, all the rest of it. A problem with a lot of them is some of them say that, you can go out there, sell deals to investors, package them up, put, the pictures on, the rental figure, the refurb cost, all the rest of it, and you can package that up and sell that to an investor for, £5,000, right? So in one case, I've actually been seeing these come into my email box. I'm signed up to the source's email. The emails are coming to me. I'm opening up the deals, and I'm looking in Rightmove and seeing the same property on Rightmove, and he's wanting £4,000 for this, right?
And is it under offer on the market?
It's on the market, on Rightmove, available.
Mm-hmm.
And I opened it up last night. I couldn't believe it because this guy's been mentioned to me a couple of times this week, and I was like, oh my God, right. So this is a thing that we need to make people aware. Number one thing, what are you going to do if somebody sends you a deal? You're going to look on Rightmove, yeah?
Yeah, you're going to look up and see the property exists if it's on the market right now, and if it is on the market, then fair enough. If it's under offer and that person is secured under offer, then that's fine. But if they don't have it under offer, they don't have that property secured.
Exactly. I mean, the chances are what's happened here is this property has been on the market for a while, I think, and obviously what's happened is the source has gone to the agent or the auction company, and they've said, "What would you take for it?" They've sort of agreed it. Roughly, we'll sell this, and then he's probably gone and done an email, made it look all fancy, and then sent it out, and it's a £4,000 sourcing fee. Now, the problem with that, I don't have an issue, right, with paying somebody if something's on Rightmove. I've done it myself before, and where we're coming from here tonight, guys, is myself and Stephen have both paid sources for deals, right? Now, my idea of a deal is probably different to your idea of a deal, Stephen. There was a time there where I was quite happy to pay the home report value. If you don't have time and you're short on time, you're very busy, you've got a busy job, whatever. In my situation, it was building a business. I'm quite happy to pay somebody to go out and do all the viewings for me. Even if it's something on Rightmove, I'll pay them, £1,000 to £2,000, depending on the kind of deal, the deal that they can negotiate. Where I think it is wrong is paying that level, that £4,000. I think it's just absolutely taking the piss, and I think people are getting ripped off there if they're paying that much.
Well, again, it depends on what the deal is. If they've negotiated it to a very good price, and it's something that really took you a long time to do your digging, do your due diligence, speak to the owner, build up a better relationship there, and then find out, how they can make that deal work. Then fine, they've put in a bit of effort for it, but. If it's market value, again, I suppose if it's market value, depends on what the end value is worth as well. So it completely depends on the deal and how attractive the deal is. I wouldn't mind paying £4,000 for it, even if it's on Rightmove, if it's a good deal.
Yeah.
But chances are in this market, it's not a good deal.
What's the most you've paid for a deal?
12,000.
Wow. Right. Okay. So there you go. So again, this is not a case of there's a certain price. You've got to work it in your numbers.
Yeah, absolutely. It's all going to be factored into the numbers. And like you just touched on there, whatever's a deal to you is not necessarily a deal to me and every other individual investor that's probably on the Facebook group page. They'll all have what their criteria is. And what we mean by when we're talking about kind of what's a deal and what not a deal is, if you've got a plan when you go into property and you're looking to gain financial freedom from 10 properties and that looks like £2,000 a month, then each one's going to be £200 a month cash flow. Then that might not suit myself or Nick. It might be completely different. So deals are going to look completely different for every person depending on what their goals, aspirations are in property. So yeah.
So the last one I paid for was pretty bog standard. It wasn't on the market, so it was an off-market deal, but it was not a huge discount. It was maybe like £10,000 discount off what I perceive to be as the market value. And what we're doing, guys, when we're looking at the values, right, we're typing in that postcode into Rightmove sold prices, and we're trying to get a close comparable, right? So the one that I heard about this week was the property that the guy that got in touch with me to complain was somebody who he'd seen the deal, and it was a 3-bedroom flat, right? But it was actually, by the time we looked into it and did a bit more research on it, it was actually a 1-bedroom flat, and they'd knocked into the loft and made 2 bedrooms into the loft space, which they didn't even have building warrants for. So when you did all your kind of comparables, you can't really do a comparable on a 3-bed flat, because the surveyor's going to come out and be like, wait a minute, this is like, what's happened here? This is, like, so you need to be careful there, and really you've got to compare apples to apples there.
So let's start on that subject then, Nick. If you're looking at a deal that a sourcer brings to you, what's your first protocol when you start doing your own due diligence? Do you do your due diligence on the property first, or the person that brings it to you?
I think I would obviously I've got to be looking at the actual the individual who's bringing it to me and thinking, what sort of credibility does this guy or girl have? Like, where have they come from? What sort of experience do they have? Like, do they have a website? Do they look professional? Are they registered? So a few things that really sourcers should be. They should be registered with a property ombudsman or the PRS. Property redress scheme. You'll see the logo PRS. You can go on their website and obviously double check that they are registered to make sure. They should have some sort of form of insurance, like PI insurance. They should be registered with the ICO, which is all data protection and all the rest of it. And they should also be like, if they're professional and they're doing it properly.
Yeah, so I'm just going to say the fourth thing was is to be registered with the HMRC for anti-money laundering.
Yeah, anti-money laundering. Also, they don't need to be a limited company, a registered limited company, but obviously I would prefer it if they were, because I could then start checking company's house and see what sort of track record they've got. Now, I'm not saying if you don't get all these things lining up, then don't do the deal. But obviously, you need to meet with them as well, or do a Zoom call, get a feel for them, try and get some try and get some references from other investors that they've worked with, which might be difficult. Look at their social media. Have they been posting on social media, track records? Try and build up a picture of them to see that they're legit. What about terms, Stephen? What sort of it can be quite intimidating. Like, if you're kind of desperate for a deal and somebody sent you something, you think this looks good in the face of it, and they want you to kind of, what's the sort of usual agreement, if you like, that sourcers will put to you?
So it depends on us, I suppose, a sourcer and what their policy is. Some sourcers will try and get the full fee up front, and if you've not worked with them before, I'd probably advise against it, especially if we don't have a track record or much credibility. And if you're kind of taking a little bit of a punt on them, then I wouldn't. And then other ones might say, do you know what, you can pay half the fee up front, and when it goes to conclude, 6 weeks later, 8 weeks later, whatever, then you can pay the remaining half the fee. But I know on my terms and conditions for the stuff that I source and pass on to other investors, is I'll always put on my terms that they pay half the fee up front, and as part of the agreement, that if something happens on that deal that they are not aware of, like they're not aware of anything to do, something to do with the title or something to do with the seller's behalf, I'll refund them their 50% of the fee immediately, because it's nothing to do with them. And if they then don't conclude and it's nothing to do with the seller situation, then they don't get a refund, because you didn't get your lender in place, or you change your mind or whatever, then fine. So read. There's probably different types of terms depending on who you're dealing with, and obviously it depends on who they are, if you kick back or not on it.
Yeah, and in this situation, this kind of case study that I was talking about, so the guy thought it was a 1-bedroom flat. The guy thought it was a 3-bedroom flat. Turned out to be a 1-bedroom flat, but he wouldn't really knowing that there was no planning consents or building warrant for that until really it went to the solicitor's stage. But he'd already paid all his money up front. So
I think that's a red flag. If you've researched the person and fair enough, if they've got a credibility and a track record, then yes, you can maybe pay that full fee up front. But if the person's not got much of a credibility and much of a track record, then I wouldn't pay a full fee up front. I was hit with this with something very similar on the first deal that I ever bought in Aberdeen, which was sourced to me from someone that just came off a property training course. They didn't do their own due diligence. That there wasn't completion certificates for the flats that are being converted from commercial to residential historically, and I had to jump through a lot of hoops and didn't end up getting lending through. I had to go and bring on a cash investor, which obviously threw my plans up for what it was. So yeah, these things do happen.
So is there anything else that you could do to check out the actual sourcer themselves of what we covered there?
I agree with everything you said, except from I'm not as concerned with the website, the logo, all that kind of bullshit, because I think that's a lot of bullshit that people try and put in place to try and make people look like they're professional and they're experienced stuff. And I know at some point that will come with some credibility, but this industry is very, very small. Like the Scottish property community is very, very small. And you touched on it. We've got 3,000 people on it, but there's not that many active sources. There's not that many really, really active investors. So if you get a deal coming to you in Glasgow or any of the cities, you'll quickly be able to look on the Scottish Property Podcast page and see people that are active in those areas, and a quick message to them and reach out and ask if they've dealt with that sourcer. They'll be able to know straight away. Yeah, I've heard of them. Or no, I've not, and they'll be able to.
Yeah, absolutely. And just reach out to us.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Reach out to myself and Stephen, and we'll be, there's a couple of names that pop up. One guy that I really recommend that my company works with, Joseph Tott at Focus Sourcing. We've had him on the podcast. We know he's legit. He's spoken at one of our events. He's been going now for 3-4 years. You can just look back on his social media. You can watch him every day going out and doing deals. That's a guy who is credible, and I've referred numerous investors to him. We work with him as well through the letting agency, and there's certain people that we would just recommend. There's others that I would just question, and just be cautious of.
And it's not that everyone doesn't deserve a fair chance. Now, you could just come off a course and be keen to get on experience, but then that's where, from an investor's point of view, if it was me looking at a deal that I know the guy didn't have didn't have a huge track record, I wouldn't not dismiss the deal, but it would make me do so much more due diligence on the property itself. Like you say, if a reliable sourcer brought you the deal, you're going to do your own due diligence, but you can take what they say quite well, and you can probably just double check it. Whereas if someone that didn't have much experience brought me a deal, I would be doing a hell of a lot more digging on the background of this property and doing my own due diligence, and and digging deep to make sure there's completion certificates and right consent.
What kind of information would you be expecting, right? So that we've talked about, researching the actual sourcer and all that. What about the deals? What sort of information, if I'm paying a good fee for something, what sort of information should I be presented with?
You should be presented with a full breakdown on what the property is, the location, a bit of local knowledge on where it is, the type of property it is, the condition of the property, so the current condition of it. Then I would break down the different exits. You want to see the different exit strategies. So you want to see, okay, how could this work for us a buy to flip, say? And here's the numbers, and here's the renovation cost, and here's our expected sale price, and this is what your profit would be minus the fee. And then obviously you'd want to see a plan B or a plan C going, oh, here's a buy to let option, and here's your renovation. It might be a slightly different renovation from the buy to let as it is from a flip. Here's our end value. Again, your end value might be so different from what your sale price be, depending on where the market is. If the market's hot and people are paying 15, 20 grand over, you can put that on your detail to say, look, we know this localized knowledge, and as it stands right now, you can get more for it. And again, break down the fee. Another option could be service accommodation, break down that again, and back this all up with due diligence. Put in comparables, put in sold prices, put in stuff that's on the market, put stuff that's recently went under offer or sold. Do as much due diligence as you can, and obviously at the back end, at the front end of this, the property should be negotiated to a price that reflects this being a good deal.
One of the first things that I would do, obviously, is if it's for a buy to let and you get quoted a rent valuation, or they're saying that there's good demand in the area for rental. One of the first things I would do is pick up the phone to a couple of local letting agents just to reconfirm that is the rental price and that there is good demand in that area. If you're Glasgow, then please pick up the phone to me or drop me a message and I'll help you out as well. just in terms of the locations, it can be quite difficult if you are investing remotely as well, if you don't know locations. Again, I think letting agents or estate agents could help in that regard as well, just to confirm that it is an okay area. In terms of the numbers and the sales price, just Rightmove house prices. What else do you use for comparable, Stephen?
Yeah, right. Sold prices is my favourite one as well. It seems to be updated quite quickly as well. So you can see the latest information. But even if you go and search on what's for sale within that postcode area, within a short distance of that postcode, make sure you're selecting the under offer or sold subject to contracts, because you can see what's kind of went under offer and what condition, and compare your similarities that haven't went through Rightmove sold prices quite yet. So you can actually see updated market information. And just like you said, Nick, pick up the phone and speak. If you're not from that area, speak to either an estate agent, a letting agent, or even better than either of them, pick up the phone to an investor who's kind of active in that area, because they'll have a boots on the ground overview of it, but also be able to put you in the right direction of an estate agent and a letting agent. That would be good as well.
So this is totally unscripted, guys. So just come in with questions and comments as we go on. I'm trying to think other things that I sometimes are a bit wary of. If there's a home report, sometimes there's a home report and it's like well out of date. You've probably seen this quite a lot up in Aberdeen where things don't sell and that. So like this is what I'm saying about off market, right? There is a lot of crap off market, a lot of shit, and usually it's off market because the reason is it's too shit to sell in the open market. Usually it'll end up going to the auction or something like that as well. Sometimes there's been a home report done that's 2 years out of date because it sat on the market, then they withdrew it, and then that kind of rings alarm bells as well. Stephen?
Yeah, absolutely. What kind of information would you, what kind of information would you want to see on a deal that you're purchasing on something like that was off market, because it wouldn't have a whole lot of photos? Do you want to see photos, videos, or would you want to go and actually view the property yourself? Because obviously, like, a lot of investors will know that once you've got an offer secured from a seller, you're not getting back in to see it until the misses are concluded, which means the sourcer's now packaging up to put under the new investor's name. So most of the time you can't see a property once you've got it from a sourcer. So if that was the case, how much information would you like to see before committing to a deal?
So, like, I've never have bought a property without seeing it. Actually, that's a lie. I do prefer to go and see it. If it's not possible, then I quite like to get a video. Like, I think video gives me a lot of kind of sort of settles my nerves a bit. I don't know about you. Like, just
I'd agree.
a walk through
detailed
video.
walkthrough video, yeah. But you know what it's like with walkthrough videos as well. Even when you skim past a wall, you can often not notice that it's wood chip wallpaper, say, and that's going to be stripping and costing a couple of grand to get it plastered.
Yeah.
So yeah, a very slow, detailed video walkthrough. A good 3 or 4 minutes where you can actually see every room, the exterior of the building, the roof, whatever you can get a look at it from that video. Yeah.
I think it comes down to, if you build up a relationship as well. Now, it's difficult if you're new to this and this is the first time you worked with somebody. But I know with like some our investors for the Arc Property Letting Agency, like a guy we worked with for a while, it's never been to Glasgow in the time that I've known him. He's never seen any of the properties he's bought. But because he knows that he can trust me, and I've been to see everything, and I send him a walkthrough video, and he's fine with that. So again, it's about building up trust in somebody.
No, absolutely. And when I started sourcing a few years back in Aberdeen, you would package, the deal up, and obviously the investor would then do their own due diligence, and they would question my rental values, because at the time, we were putting the rental properties on for 150, 175 pound a month more than the shit that was sitting on the market, but they were flying off the shelf, and they weren't sitting there at the price we were putting on it. So investors would question it, and they do their own due diligence, quite rightly so, and look, well, I can't see this flat at 575. I can only see one at £400 for a 1-bedroom flat, and you're explaining it, but you're backing it up with, here, go and speak to my letting agent. He'll be able to describe that as well. But you're absolutely right. The more you build it up, and the more you do, like, I go out to find deals for myself, and the other ones that I don't take on at the time, I'll pass on to my inner kind of sourcing clients, and then I'll maybe go out to the list. So the people that are working with me know that I'm doing this for my own stuff. I'm doing this for my own investors. So they're genuinely good properties and good deals. They wouldn't be going to see them in the first place if I wasn't. They wouldn't have passed that first criteria, that first check.
Yep. And I think it's kind of like quite common at the moment. There's a lot of tenanted properties kicking about just now. A lot of landlords selling up. Apparently, I've not seen it that much myself, but a few sources come in with tenanted properties. You should obviously take care there, guys, as well, because like Stephen was talking about, obviously, title deeds and issues with titles and issues with planning and building warrants. But if you've got a tenant in there and they don't have the correct paperwork and you take on that headache, maybe that the reason for that landlord might be selling is because they're not getting any rent coming in. Maybe they can't evict them because they're not in the correct tenancy agreement and the paperwork's not being set up. So that is so important. You should do extra level of due diligence and checks, or make sure your sourcer has a track record of that rental income coming in.
Yeah, that's a good point, actually. Buying a tenanted property is a whole different ballgame. I mean, there is so much more due diligence to check on. Like, go give the listeners an overview of the things you would check on if you were buying a tenanted property, because I think you touched on most of them there, but a detailed breakdown would be, I think, so useful for people, because this is where I think you could go into hot water, because if you bought it with the wrong, or not a PRT in place and you couldn't get rid of the tenant, like we've got eviction bans and rent freezes right now, you could be stuck with a property that you can't get a tenant out and get no income from.
Absolutely. So obviously you've got the certification and the compliance, EICR, gas safety certificate, Legionella, like all these things, the smoke alarms and that. Now, that is like quite important because you want the property to be compliant, but at the end of the day, it's something that can be quite easily fixed if it doesn't have all these things. As long as you can get access to the property, you can go in there, spend a bit. For me, it's not a deal breaker. Do you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. The thing that I want to know is that you're inheriting a situation or a tenant, so you want to make sure that your asset is got the income coming in on day one. So that is going to be a very bad investment if you buy that property and you don't get any income coming in because your tenant's got a track record of not paying the rent, or they've tried to evict the tenant and they've not got anywhere with it. So what I want to be seeing is, I want to be seeing a rent statement, basically, or a bank statement showing the last 6 months of rent coming in on time.
Yeah, and could you get that from the seller's letting agent, or even if they were self-managed, you just ask the landlord to prove it that they've seen the rent roll?
So if they've got a letting agent, then they should have, usually letting agents use software where they can just download a rent statement. Could take that, or else if it's a self-managing landlord, then I'd be looking for, really want to see bank statements, to be honest with you.
Would you be asking to see the PRT and like the deposit scheme and stuff like that?
Yeah, so I'd want to make sure, well, I would want to see the lease. So whether it be a short or shared tenancy, or else really preferably a PRT, which came, private residential tenancy, which came into effect in December 2017. It's much better if they're on one of them. So I'd want to see a copy of that lease and obviously check what the rent they're paying is on it, and if they've taken a deposit as well. If that landlord's taking a deposit, where's it protected? Is that deposit going to get transferred across to me or into my account in Safe Deposit Scotland scheme as well? All that.
I'm assuming if some of the stuff's not missing, it's quite a red flag for you as an investor taking that on, because if something's missing, then the person you're buying it from is not taking their property business seriously, are they?
Well, the risk is that you buy something with a tenant and then you've got the eviction ban at the moment, and you could be talking 2 years basically to get them out. Do you know what I mean? That doesn't make sense at all. So it's pretty risky. We want to make sure they're a good tenant, that's for sure.
No, absolutely. A good tenant could be an asset as much as a liability. So yeah, making sure doing your due diligence on that tenant when you're buying a tenanted property is just as important as doing the due diligence on the property itself and the sourcer.
Yep.
Sorry to interrupt this podcast, but just wanted to let you know about the Scottish Property Podcast Christmas Ball, which is happening at the Village Hotel in Glasgow on Saturday the 3rd of December.
Can't wait. Myself and Stephen thought it'd be a great idea to have an end of year party like no other party to celebrate building this amazing community. There's going to be a whole range of people there to network with from the great and good of the Scottish Property Network. Whether you are single, bring your partner along, or if you're an office party, make it a work night out.
Early bird tickets are available on our website for £95, which include a welcome drink, 3-course dinner, live music, and a DJ up until 1 o'clock in the morning to allow us to party on. Hope to see you guys there.
Guys, let's get some comments and questions in. That's been about half an hour, so we want to wrap up here with some comments. I'm going to fire them up on the screen here so that you can see them. So on YouTube, take it that's not your real name, Arthur Daly. Evening, chaps. Do deal sourcers provide a service to break down the numbers in a deal as well as sourcing the deal? Is deal sourcing an expense in a limited company? Stephen, do you want to try and answer that one?
Yeah, absolutely. You'd want to break down as much. At the end of the day, they're doing that job for you, and they're meant to have the experience and the track record and the knowledge to do it. So yeah, they should break down all their numbers. They should give you the legal cost, what your ADS you would pay, and what deposit you would require if you were lending it, and they should break down your refurb costs as detailed as they can. So they should be able to have a good viewing, loads of pictures, like I said, Nick was in a video, broken down the renovation, giving you an estimated sale price or end value. If you want to do a BRR, you should put in how much your loan to value refinancing at the back end would be, how much money it would leave in, what your rental income would be, and what your cash flow would be. So they should be able to take off all your costs as well, what your mortgage cost would be, your insurance, your maintenance costs, and here's what your cash flow is. They should completely hand it to you, and I suppose the point on it is for you to just go and quickly do your due diligence checks on the actual property, make sure that everything's is what they say it is.
Two figures that I'm always looking at is the cash flow figure, monthly cash flow, which is basically your profit after all your expenses, and the return on my cash invested. So whether that be, depending on your mortgage rates and your loan to value, then you should have an ROI figure, return on investment percentage. Okay, next question, guys. So sorry, guys, with the Facebook questions, we can't see your name. So this one says, I've seen a lot of deals quoting mortgage interest rates way under what we can actually get these days. Need to be super careful with monthly cash flow figures quoted. Very good point.
Really, really, really good point. I've actually had 3 deals in the last few weeks, which I haven't sent out to my investors. I've not even sent it to anyone because they don't stack up as we're seeing right now. So if I was doing my due diligence before and it was at 4 or a stretch left to 5, we're not getting these rates anymore. So these deals aren't getting sent out. They're as of right now, the interest rates the way they're no longer deals. So if they're no longer deals to me, they're no longer deals to everyone else if you can't get decent enough cash flow profit every month from it.
Obviously, see your mortgage broker for the latest deals, but I'm talking about around about 7% at the moment. Do you know what I mean for the buy-to-let mortgages?
Yeah, keep checking with your mortgage broker. Let them know what deals what rate you can get to keep you completely relevant and exactly what the lending position is, because it's changing daily at the moment.
On to LinkedIn. Saqib Aslam, how you doing? Hope you're well. How would you value on how much to pay for a deal? As most deals start around 2K and some go up to 12K. That's what we were talking about there, Stephen. So I've paid 1,000. I've paid 1,000 for something on Rightmove, agreed at like a couple of grand below home report value. I've paid £2,000 for something off market, which was about £10,000 under the perceived market value. You were saying that you've... So I'm getting bombarded here. On you go, mate.
Yeah, absolutely. So keep it depends on the deal itself and what it means to you. But yeah, I've paid £1,500 for something that wasn't a huge discount, left a wee bit of money in it, but it suited me at the time. To up to £12,000 for a small portfolio that's also brought to me as well. So again, it depends really what is. Some people doing a percentage off it, but it has to be. Yeah, it just has to tick your criteria and tick how your investment criteria stacks up. And obviously, something that a lot of people don't do is the fact that they don't factor in the fee they're paying as well for the deal in the first place. This is part of your costs associated with buying the property and adding to your portfolio.
Right, because I'm getting bombarded here, I'm going to fire up the next question here and I'm going to mute my mic.
So this Facebook user, we can't see who it's from again. If you buy a tenanted property, do you need to honour all the terms and conditions of the current lease agreement in full? Now, this is definitely a question for you.
So if you buy tenanted property, do you need to honour all the terms and conditions of the current lease agreement in full? Well, you can change things, but I mean, you would need to give the appropriate notice period. So, for example, if they're paying £500 rent and it's on the tenancy agreement, then obviously, well, it's all changed now, of course, because we're under a rent freeze by the Scottish government. Yeah, that's fine. But
There's a passcode.
2 seconds.
Don't say the passcode live on Facebook, Nick.
Passcode. So yeah, you can go to that tenant and say we're going to put your rent up, but obviously you would need to give the appropriate notice period, 3 months if it's a PRT. And at the moment, you can't put the rent up because we're going through a rent freeze. So you need to keep that in mind. Terms and conditions. Well, generally other terms and conditions will be, no pets, that sort of thing. I don't know what
is there a new PRT offered once you buy a tenanted property then, Nick?
I would say it would be better to get them onto a new lease. You don't need to, but you really want to, because you want to have your name on there as the landlord.
Mm-hmm. And it's flexible for you when you can exit that agreement as well as a tenant to exit the agreement as well and give 28 days notice.
But if you've got a decent tenant there, then usually there'll be no problem. What I would do is obviously introduce yourself as a new landlord, try and get a good rapport there with the tenant and get a good relationship, and then just try and get them onto that new lease.
I'm selling a property on Friday with a sitting tenant in place, one from my portfolio, and it's one of Sam Dyer's clients that's buying, and he's taking on the new lease. So he spoke with a new tenant and let them, the tenant and the existing tenant, and let them know that the landlord is selling and it's in the process of selling, but nothing changing in their agreement. It's just there's an investor, that's who's buying the property, and they just want to keep on as normal. So just keeping that line of communications open up with everyone, it just makes it all smoother.
Yeah. On to the next one. Jacqueline, how you doing? What are you currently stress testing the interest rates at? Well, I don't know about you, Stephen, but I'm currently just taking a breather at the moment. I'm just kind of letting the dust settle with the whole mini budget thing and the whole kind of all the mortgage rates getting pulled. Now lenders are coming back into the market, but what I've seen so far hasn't really been that appealing.
I'm stress testing mine to 10%, which means the majority of what I'm looking at is not stacking up at all. So, good question, Jacqueline. Yeah,
I think the stress, but the thing is, if you're fixing in for 5 years, okay, if we hit a really bad recession, but even like 2008, this is what I keep telling people. We had a really bad crash in 2008. Went through a few bad years, but by the time 2012 came, things were on the up again. Do you know what I mean? So, I know you want...
Absolutely. And this is the stuff that I'm looking at the moment. It's going to, for a standard buy-to-let, and this is a phenomenal yielding property, which I tend to avoid. I'm looking at ones that are like, HMO areas or ones that you can maybe use to be a service accommodation where the income is so much greater than a normal rental income, because it's not stacking up at the moment. The stress test that we're putting on it. I saw one of my broker, actually, I've been doing the same, is up keeping tabs with my broker every couple of days, and I spoke to her on Friday, and she says that most lenders are asking for 8.64% stress testing right now.
Right.
That will change, but
who would have thought that we would ever be stress testing at 8 to 10%? Do you know what I mean? Like, we've had so many years of cheap money and cheap credit, and like a 5% stress test, that was like, whoa, you're stress testing at 5%. That was a lot.
I know. It's taken me a few weeks to actually shake off what's happened the last 5 or 6 years and go, do you know what? We've just had it so easy. This is the norm, and this should be getting back to normal basically. Now we just got it so easy for a while.
We had to come back to this, I mean, it was going to happen eventually. The days of I mean, like you were talking about this earlier as well, like our own residential mortgages, like we've fixing for like what 1.6% for a
I might fix at 1.64%. Yeah, it's nuts.
1.6%, unbelievable. It had to end sometimes, guys, and it's ended now.
Do you know? Interesting. It might diversify a little bit in the conversation, but it's taught me I should have overpaid more while the interest rates were so low. But you're in the acquisition stage, so you wanted to just keep growing at that point. But it would have been good to pay down some debt while the interest rates are so low.
And that's the beauty about property investing. You're leveraging the bank's money. So, like, you're putting in 25%, you're leveraging the 75% at the cheaper interest rates. So why would you not want to? Do you know what I mean? It made sense at the time, obviously. So, right. What advice would you give sourcers about what due diligence they can or should carry out on investors? Oh, there. So just flipping the coins. So we've been talking about that. Very good point. You guys have rightly mentioned the trust required definitely works both ways. There are a lot of time wasters out there. Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, really good point actually, because it took me a long time to build up the clientele that I'm working with, because a lot of the people that you spoke to were time wasters. So and obviously if you have a property secured, you're on about a time frame to work. So if people mess you about, it does actually affect your relationship, your reputation, especially as a selling agent. So yeah, I completely agree. And it kind of comes back to a lot like the HMRC anti-money laundering checks. You want to see their ID, their proof of income, proof of address, also proof of funds. I would ask for. A lot of the time, if I've not worked with an investor before, I'll always ask for proof of funds, just to make sure that they're not pulling your plonker and dreaming. But there's some investors there is some investors that obviously won't have the funds there, and they'll go to private investors finance to get them, which you have to. But having that conversation up front with them and understanding that, absolutely. But the other thing as well is I now take half the fee up front. So as soon as investors looked at my deals, it'll be a handful of people I'll send it to straight away. I'll be kind of first come, first serve, because I know that I'll be speaking to all those investors that are trustworthy. The first one that pays half the fee secures it. And if they pull out and waste my time, they don't get that fee back. But if something obviously goes wrong with the property and the sale situation, then I'll give them their full money back. So yeah.
That comes with experience and credibility as well, because once you reach a certain, like you've done this before and you've got a track record, then you can just go straight in there and say, no, these are my terms. You'll pay me this on day one. And, that's the way to stop the time wasters. And it's like...
Yeah, absolutely. And if you haven't worked with an investor before, often take the fee fully up front, because you won't know if they're going to be a time waster or not. But again, you're absolutely spot on. We can't see who's asked that question. It's on Facebook, but spot on, completely spot on. The trust and the due diligence works absolutely both ways.
Susan says here about the due diligence investors is easy. Company's House and Land Registry tells you a lot. So I think we've had this conversation with Susan before where, you get the kind of like the belly big times coming in. I've got a property portfolio, like I'm, got so many 20 properties already. Send me your deals. And then you go on Company's House and then you don't see any record, which is not necessarily... Like, you need to be careful, because obviously if you're doing personal buy-to-lets and you're just doing them under your personal name, then they're not going to be on Company's House. Or if you buy cash, then the charges are not going to be in Company's House either.
Yeah, but there'll be a lot. There won't be many investors that are buying, one, in their own name right now, and two, buying cash. So like Susan says, you probably don't find a lot of information about people quite easily. It could be that Company's House, it could be the first time they're buying a property in the portfolio. So yeah, but again, it's just having that open, honest conversation with people as well, and understanding exactly who they are and what they're looking to get out of it.
Yeah. Hi, gents. What are your thoughts on the new legislation from the Scottish Government for SA in regards to new planning licensing requirements? Something we need to do more content on for the podcast. My understanding is that I think Edinburgh have come in pretty hard on it, and I think they're like, now I think you need like a change of use planning. Like, don't quote me on this. This is just like, I'm trying to remember the stuff that I've read in the press. Some people say it's a good thing because it's like making it a lot more harder. So like, it's going to make it a lot more professional, the whole industry. Like, because everybody was moaning. Remember when they came in with all the like in lettings, for example, in my industry, we had to get a license to operate as a letting agency, right? So right back before this happened, everyone's like, this is terrible. Everybody was up in arms about it. I thought, no, this is good. This is going to get rid of all the shit letting agents. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I completely agree as well. Like, people have put their spare bedroom on service, like, Airbnb, and try to do service accommodation and, milk that money cow. But it looks like it's running out because you never got to be legitimately, apply for planning, change of use, whatever. I think from my understanding, I think each council's different as well, reacts it differently. So I think it's a good thing. I think it's good. It's definitely going to help regulate that industry. And at the end of the day, we've got to make properties that we rent out on the long-term rental market fit for purpose and safe for people to use. But on the service accommodation, there was no compliance, there was no safety, there was no regulations at all. So it's a good thing. It's making properties safer as well for people to utilise.
If I was going to an SA, what I would say is I would probably go for more houses than flats, because it's only going to take now one complaint from a neighbour to the council. The council will be like, no, shut you down. And it's happened already, I think, in Glasgow. So I would watch out for flats. Okay, we're getting to the end of the questions, guys. Hi, guys. I'm in the process of remortgaging one of my properties, and the bank has stated that they might not lend as the stress test says that I won't make as much in a buy-to-let, and this is through a broker. That's just obviously what we're talking about there with the stress testing. So, Jonathan Williams.
I was waiting on that coming up as a question, because I managed to get pretty much all of them, and the ones I've obviously mortgages through before this was happening, the ones that did come up I've just left to sit. So definitely keep tabs with your broker, but if you could hold off without refinancing, I possibly would until it calms down and the interest rates go back down. I don't know. It's again, speak to a good broker and make sure you get good guidance on that.
Last question here, guys, and we'll shoot. Opportunities on the horizon. Rates won't go much higher because government debt would be out of control. They should stabilise, but we're in unprecedented times with QE and fiat currency. Right, okay, guys, we are going to wrap up there. Thanks very much for all your questions and comments. Stephen, the big announcement.
Brilliant. We still got the early bird tickets sale on the Scottish Property Podcast Christmas Ball. We're saying it's a ball because we're trying to be fancy and and make it sound posh and stuff. It's really a piss up for the people of the Scottish property community to get together, enjoy everyone's company, build up more relationships. Whether you're new to property, you're single, you're on your own, you're a independent investor or flipper or whatever you do in your property journey, or you're with partners or you're a small business. It's for everyone to get together.
So get across to the Scottish Property Podcast website where we have all the tickets there. And I'll be going there myself as well because we've not got childcare. So don't worry about being by yourself because I'll be there by myself. So get over, book your tickets, and we hope to see you there. Thanks again, guys. And
thanks a lot, guys. Cheers.
Next week.